Berkeley. I'm Dennis Bernstein. You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. We're delighted to welcome back Greg Palast, author of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. Now a film, updated now and released on Amazon. So congratulations, Greg. Welcome back to Flashpoints.
Yep. In fact, it's free if you've got that Amazon Prime. Out this week, we updated it because, unfortunately, America's been updated with Trump. The film originally warned you that a guy named Kris Kobach of Kansas, can't remember that name, just think KKK, Trump's vote thief in chief. I said he was going to be the mastermind behind Trump stealing the election, and he did it. So we updated the film to show you how he did it, and now he's back in the news, and that's why I'm happy to speak with you. This week, or last week, I should say, the Trump disbanded his so-called vote fraud commission, which was headed by Kris Kobach of Kansas and officially known as the Presidential Commission on Election Integrity. It was disbanded because Kris Kobach of Kansas was being bombarded with lawsuits by the Brennan Center, by every civil rights organization you could think of with a lawyer, and even the single Democrat who was foolish enough to join his commission and found out he was being denied access to even such things as the meeting dates of the commission. So they were operating in secret. Kris Kobach, forgetting that the Soviet Union no longer exists and has not moved to America, thought he could operate in secret. But now he has disbanded it because there's so much public criticism. So the president has issued an executive order. Trump just said the commission's disbanded. Now, does that? Trump said that despite substantial evidence of voter fraud, many states have refused to provide the president's advisory commission on election integrity with basic information. That's why they had to give it to Homeland Security to bring the investigators in. Yes. Well, two things. So, number one, the commission was formed, and Trump was just tweeting and bleeding that there is massive vote fraud, as you know, and if you've been listening to me and you last with our election crimes bulletins, they've claimed that 3 million people voted twice. That's Kris Kobach, who created something called interstate cross-check, a system to reveal these 3 million double voters, people voting illegally twice in the same election in two different states. How do you he couldn't produce any actual double voters, but he did have a list of 3 million, which I obtained, of these illegal voters. And it was just, people with names like Jose Rodriguez and James Brown. Believe it or not, they found two people named James Brown voting in two different states. Now, they had different middle names, but hey, doesn't matter. As far as Republicans concerned, that was a double voter. That's the type of fraud and fraudulent voter that they were looking for. And so, yes, a lot of states refused or appeared to refuse. By the way, most of those states were lying. Almost every Republican state turned over their voter rolls to Donald Trump and Kris Kobach. They lied and said that they didn't, but enough states, including the state of California, simply refused to turn over their voter rolls for those guys to go tromping through and finding more people named Jose Rodriguez that they could claim voted in another state. So you had resistance, you had lawsuits. So what are they doing now? They're putting it in Homeland Security. So they've closed it down. That you could look at as a victory because they recognize they can't operate in public and get away with their shenanigans. So they put it in Homeland Security for two purposes. Number one is secrecy. They believe that by saying this is an anti-terrorism effort, that they somehow have the cloak of secrecy for them by working with Homeland Security. Well, you can't just call something a hunt for black Democrats, a hunt for terrorists, and make it secret. I've just been on the phone with Jesse Jackson and several lawyers who said you can call it whatever you want, but if it's a racial purge of voters, they still better make those records public. So there's still going to be a fight. That's number one. Number two, and it is dangerous, they're going to try to use the power of Homeland Security. And I'm not guessing, Kris Kobach did say this on Fox, that they will use the police powers of Homeland Security to seize the voter rolls of California and New York and other states that are refusing to turn over their voter rolls so they can tromp through and find double voters, and Homeland Security is going to be saying that it's looking for illegal alien voters. That's the other big claim that they've made, that there are literally 1 to 3 million aliens, who've swum the Rio Grande just so that they could vote in our school board elections. Now, it may be laughable, except it's no joke, when they start purging people whose crime is having a Hispanic last name.
Greg, and we spent most of the show today talking about the administration's decision to abruptly end temporary protected status for some 200,000 Salvadorans. He did this for Haitians just a little bit ago. It seems it's sort of part of a piece, in a way. It's an attack on black and brown people, and it's an attempt to cleanse black and brown people from the voter rolls and some from the country.
Well, in fact, don't discount this. Kris Kobach of Kansas, Mr. KKK, as I mentioned in my film and in my work for Rolling Stone, he not only is Secretary of State of Kansas, and he's running for governor, by the way, of Kansas, and he not only is heading Trump's commission, or I don't know what his position now will be with Homeland Security, but he remains the lawyer for a group called FAIR. And FAIR's founder said its entire purpose is to maintain a European America. And I have a suspicion he doesn't mean a European Haitian America, okay? So this guy is a white supremacist, and I don't use that term, I don't throw that term around easily. He is a declared white supremacist, Kris Kobach. And he is in charge. He is in charge of the politics behind these Trumpian racist deportation moves. And it's of a piece with cleansing the voter rolls. Because understand, when they talk about deporting people, if they find someone, again, named Jose Rodriguez, which is, there were hundreds of people named Jose Rodriguez on those voter rolls that they were attempting to purge, and did purge, by the way, in the last election. When they create these lists of illegal aliens and they start deporting aliens, they're also going to be attacking the voter rights of anyone with a similar name. So don't discount the attack on the you can't disconnect the attack on the voter rolls from the attack on legitimate alien Americans who want to become citizens. So they're going after the ones who've become citizens already or who've been citizens for generations. Let's not forget that, in New Mexico and California, for a lot of Hispanics, the border crossed them, and it's not that they crossed the border.
And, talk a little bit about, what you're preparing for. We're seeing this unfold now. We're seeing this commission being moved into Homeland Security. We've got the 2018 elections coming up. These are going to be highly contested. How are you making preparations? What are you going to do, Greg, to stop them from stealing these elections?
Well, number one, I better keep reporting the story because we're not getting it on the mainstream media. They laugh at Kris Kobach and the claims of voter fraud, but what they're not doing is investigating, and that's what our work has been doing. And again, I'm happy to work with Rolling Stone and others to. It's not a joke. They're using this absurdity that millions of illegal alien voters, double voters, and others, and the double voters are always, almost in all cases that they've identified, are voters of color. Okay, so it's not. So the first thing is exposure, which is very difficult to do in an America which believes that, as Hillary Clinton put it, we have the most wonderful electoral system in the world, which means she's only been to Kazakhstan. So the first thing is, I could tell you, by the way, I just came back from Switzerland. I was, yesterday I was in Switzerland, where they do read my reports, my work is popular there, and they're stunned that it's so hard for them to get around the idea that we don't count all the votes or let everyone vote. This is in a nation, Switzerland, where everyone is required by law to vote. And, like they don't even understand this idea that someone wouldn't vote or wouldn't get their vote counted, or that you can get away with taking away someone's vote by saying, oh, they don't have the right ID, even, or something like that. They find it, they're absolutely stunned that this is still happening. And that's true in other nations in Europe who are just stunned at the U.S. system. So number one, it's exposure. Number two, political action. And we've seen Jesse Jackson and Rainbow Push are doing a national campaign, which is starting with interstate cross-check Kris Kobach's, game saying that millions of people voted twice, just as a way to remove every guy named James Brown from the list, and every guy named Jesse Jackson, by the way, from the voter rolls as well. And then there's legal action. The great class action lawyer Jeannie Meyer, in fact, was just calling a moment to go to my office because she's about to file open records requests on the states that are working with Kobach on his scheme to remove so-called double voters, demanding that they release their hit lists, release their racist purge lists, because if they release the lists and we go through them, our experts already know what are on those lists, because we have about a third of the names. And like I say, this is an attack on voters of color. So there's a political attack, a legal attack, a journalistic attack, meaning the journalism's job is exposure. Hard to do. Hard to get editors and producers in America to do any story about anything but America being a wonderful democracy. So, you're the guy who is, passing gas at the debutante ball of American democracy. It's not done. And so it's a very difficult thing to accomplish. So those are the three things: exposure, political action, and legal action. And obviously it would be nice to see legislative action as well, but, that would require the Democrats.
Well, I was going to say the Democrats, but they've been deadbeats on all this stuff, haven't they? I mean, they have not been willing from Gore in 2000, well. They're just cowards to take this on.
Well, some of it is cowardice, and unfortunately in my investigations of what is politely called vote suppression, that unfortunately Democrats have taken part in this too, not on the kind of industrial, computerized scale that Republicans have done, but you'd have a very different Democratic Party if every voter of color was allowed to vote and had their votes counted. A very different Democratic Party. And I saw this particularly in New Mexico, where I saw brutal vote suppression, where machines simply did not work in the pueblos. Machines simply did not work, and therefore recorded no votes, 0 votes for president in certain precincts that were heavily Hispanic Democrat. And who was in charge of running the vote? Hispanic Democrats under the direction of Bill Richardson. So you had kind of an elite Hispanic Democrats fearful of the votes in primaries of poor Mexicanos. And this is a big, remember, vote theft is kind of class war by other means. And so therefore, you would expect it from Republicans, but you still have the problem of Democrats being involved, and they don't want to give up those tools either.
Well, that's a problem for all of us, Greg Palast. You can learn a lot more if you have an opportunity to connect with some of the work of Greg Palast. You can go to gregpalast.com, find out all about his film, about the latest release, find out about a lot more in terms of how to defend your vote. But this is, it really isn't taken seriously, and I'm not sure how to read the killing of the Kobach Commission. May be a good thing, may be a bad thing, or it may be irrelevant, because these folks are going to do this at the grassroots. They're going to steal the vote, and it's going to be continuing to target people of color because they don't have the resources to fight back.
Well, I think it does matter. For number one, it is a political victory. That is the Kobach Commission was roundly dismissed as a joke. It shouldn't be a joke, because these guys ain't fooling around. It's not a circus act. These guys are serious. It is dangerous because there's been so much crowing about by the liberals and MSDNC reporting. You would think that they've just saved the nation by driving Kris Kobach underground, but driving Kris Kobach into Homeland Security and his operation into a place, into basically the Secret Service of the United States, now to use police powers and conducting operations in the dark. That's extremely dangerous. But again, most of this activity happens at the state level. And, most of the Flashpoints listeners are in California. There's a lot of cleanup there, and that's in a one-party Democratic state. If you remember, Alex Padilla oversaw a primary in June of 2016 in which nearly 1 million ballots were never counted, disqualified through cockamamie manipulation of the vote, forcing people to use provisional ballots or having their ballots disqualified because they used the wrong ballot. So it's games that I saw in Alabama, games that I saw in Mississippi, and here we're having this kind of Jose Crow operation in California. So, it's up to activists, it's up to an informed public. Don't depend on the parties to save your vote.
All right. Well, I'm looking forward, Greg, as it comes a little bit closer to the elections, that we strike up our election crimes bulletin, because we know we're going to need it. We're going to need the great work that you've been doing for so many years, Greg, and we appreciate this ongoing collaboration. Again, people can check you out at gregpalast.com. Films available. A great deal of information is available. And we thank you, Greg, for always making yourself available to our listeners and to the Flashpoint Show.
Terrific. Thank you, Dennis.
All right. Take care now. Bye.
Bye.
And that wraps it up for another edition of Flashpoints. Our executive producer is Dennis Bernstein. Our roving producer and producer of Flashpoints in Espanol is Miguel Gavilan Molina. Our technical director is Mike Biggs. For more information about the show, to listen to or download archived episodes, log on to flashpoints.net or visit our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/flashpoints. For questions or comments about Flashpoints, you can contact Dennis at dennisjbernstein@gmail.com. Thank you for listening.